My family thinks they built the Tesla killer. They call it the Vanguard 1A luxury electric hypercar with a 1,000-mile range. My father is the CEO, my sister is the visionary founder, and they are currently ringing the opening bell at NASDAQ as the stock skyrockets to $300 a share. But they didn't build the car. I did. I designed the revolutionary infinity cell battery in our garage while they were busy picking out leather swatches. They promised me 30% equity. Instead, they forced me to sign over the patents for liability reasons and fired me 2 days before the IPO, escorted out by security like a criminal. They think I'm gone. They think the car is perfect. But they don't know that the battery management firmware has a heartbeat protocol, a safety lock that requires a manual code entry every 168 hours to prevent thermal runaway. If it doesn't get the code, the cooling pumps shut off and the car bricks itself to prevent an explosion. The first batch of 5,000 cars was delivered to VIPs exactly 1 week ago. That means in about 20 minutes, every single Vanguard 1 on the road is going to simultaneously die. My hands are permanently stained. It's a mix of lithium grease, dielectric oil, and solder flux that no amount of industrial soap can scrub away. For the last 5 years, those stains were my badge of honor. To my family, they were just proof that I was the help. My name is Lucas Vanguard. Well, technically, I'm the co-founder of Vanguard Motors, the hottest EV startup in Silicon Valley. But if you check the S1 filing with the SEC, my name isn't there. My father, Robert, is the CEO. He's a man who thinks torque is something you do to a business deal. My sister, Elena, is the chief brand officer. She has 2 million Instagram followers and describes herself as a tech visionary, even though she thinks Wi-Fi travels through HVAC ducts. And me? I was the head of RAND. Which meant I lived in the workshop. It started 5 years ago. I was obsessed with energy density. The problem with EVs wasn't the motor, it was the battery. Lithium-ion was heavy, hot, and degraded too fast. I spent thousands of hours in the back of my dad's old machine shop, experimenting with graphene lacing and solid-state electrolytes. I blew up a lot of prototypes. I singed my eyebrows off twice. But then, I cracked it. The infinity cell. It was a battery pack that was 40% lighter than a Tesla's, didn't overheat, and offered a verified range of 1,000 miles on a single charge. It was the holy grail of automotive engineering. I remember the day I showed them. I had retrofitted an old Porsche 911 with the prototype pack. "Get in," I told my dad. We drove from San Francisco to Portland without stopping. When we arrived, the battery was still at 30%. My father didn't look at the engineering data. He didn't ask about the thermal management system. He just looked at the odometer, and then he looked at me with dollar signs in his eyes. "We're going to be richer than God," he whispered. Over the next 2 years, we built the company. I worked 18-hour days. I designed the chassis, the drivetrain, and the proprietary cooling system that kept the infinity cell stable. The cooling system was critical. The energy density was so high that if the temperature fluctuated by even 5 degrees, the chemical reaction would destabilize. Not explode. I designed it to be safe, but it would brick. The chemical paste would harden into a useless gray block of cement to prevent a fire. To manage this, I wrote a custom firmware kernel. It was delicate. It needed constant monitoring. My sister, Elena, handled the press. She went on The Tonight Show. She was on the cover of Forbes. "The Woman Who Killed Gas," the headline read. She stood in front of my car, wearing a white jumpsuit, talking about her vision for a green future. I stood in the wings, wearing my grease-stained polo shirt, holding a tablet, monitoring the telemetry. "Don't worry, Lucas," my dad would say, clapping me on the back. "You're the Wozniak to her Jobs. You're the secret weapon. When we go public, you're getting 30% of the founder's stock. You'll never have to turn a wrench again." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my dad. But as the IPO approached, the mood changed. The investors, sharks from Wall Street, started hanging around the shop. They didn't like me. I was unpolished. I argued with them about safety protocols. I refused to cut corners on the brake calipers to save $50 per unit. "He's difficult," I heard one of them tell my father. "He's a liability. Wall Street likes stability, Robert. Your son is a tinkerer. We need corporate governance." 2 weeks before the IPO, my father called me into his glass-walled office. Elena was there, too, looking at her phone. "Lucas," my dad said, sliding a thick stack of papers across the mahogany desk. "We need to restructure the IP holdings. The lawyers say that having the patents in your personal name is a risk factor for the IPO. We need to transfer everything to Vanguard Holdings LLC." "What does that mean?" I asked, picking up a pen. "It's just paperwork, little brother," Elena said, not looking up. "It protects the stock price. You still get your equity. This just puts the patents in the company vault so the banks feel safe." "You promise?" I asked. "Lucas," my dad said, looking hurt. "We're family. Do you really think we'd screw you over?" I looked at them. I looked at the car parked in the lobby, the machine I had poured my soul into. I signed. I signed over the infinity cell. I signed over the cooling system patent. I signed over the firmware copyright. I put down the pen. "Great," my dad said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Send in security." The doors opened. 2 massive guards in black suits walked in. "What's this?" I asked, standing up. "You're fired, Lucas," my dad said, his His voice flat and businesslike. For cause. Cause? What cause? Insubordination. Failure to adhere to budget constraints. And general instability, Elena chimed in. We can't have a loose cannon running RAND for a public company. We hired a new CTO. He used to work at Ford. He knows how to follow orders. You can't do this, I stammered, backing away. I built this car. I have equity. Read the contract you just signed, my dad said, waving the document. You transferred the IP in exchange for, let's see, a fair market value stipend of $50,000. And since you're fired for cause before the vesting cliff, your stock options are void. He stood up and turned his back on me. Escort Mr. Vanguard off the premises, he told the guards. And make sure he doesn't touch any computers on the way out. They grabbed my arms. They dragged me out of the building I helped build. They threw me onto the sidewalk in the rain. I sat there on the curb, watching the Vanguard Motors logo glowing on the side of the building. I had nothing. No patent. No job. No money. But then, I remembered something. The cooling system firmware. The new CTO from Ford. He was a hardware guy. He wouldn't check the deep code. He wouldn't know about the safety protocol I had hard-coded into the kernel 3 years ago. The heartbeat protocol. It was designed for development prototypes. To ensure the cars were regularly inspected, I wrote a line of code that required a specific, encrypted handshake from the central server every 168 hours, exactly 1 week. If the car didn't receive the handshake, the computer assumed the cooling system was unmonitored and unsafe. To prevent a thermal event, it would permanently shut down the battery. It would turn the car into a 2-ton paperweight. I looked at my watch. They fired me 2 days ago. The first 5,000 Founders Edition cars were delivered to VIP customers exactly 1 week ago today. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call them. I opened my brokerage app. I had $10,000 in savings. I put it all on puts against Vanguard stock. The clock was ticking. And nobody at headquarters knew how to reset the timer. The security guards didn't just walk me to the door, they walked me to the perimeter of the industrial park. One of them, a guy named Mike who I had bought coffee for every morning for 3 years, couldn't even look me in the eye. Sorry, Lucas, he mumbled as he unclipped my badge. Mr. Vanguard said if you come back within 500 feet, we have to call the cops. It's fine, Mike, I said, shivering in the rain. Just don't buy the stock. I took an Uber back to my apartment. It was a studio in a converted warehouse, full of soldering irons, 3D printers, and half-finished circuit boards. It was the only home I had because I had poured every cent of my salary back into the company. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic because I believed my dad when he said, "We eat last, son. Leaders sacrifice." I checked my bank account. The $50,000 stipend hadn't even cleared yet. I was broke. The next morning, a courier arrived. He handed me a thick envelope. Civil restraining order. Plaintiff, Vanguard Motors. Defendant, Lucas Vanguard. They were blocking me from contacting any employees, entering any facilities, or disparaging the company publicly. It was a gag order wrapped in a legal threat. My father wasn't taking chances. He wanted me erased. I spent the next 2 days in a fugue state. I watched the news. The hype machine was in overdrive. Vanguard Motors set to debut on NASDAQ tomorrow. The Tesla killer is finally here. I saw Elena giving interviews. She looked radiant. She told a story about how she came up with the idea for the infinity cell while meditating in Joshua Tree. It was a lie so bold it almost impressed me. But my mind kept drifting to the car itself. Specifically, the firmware. When my dad fired me, he mentioned the new CTO. Paul Miller. I knew the name. He was an industry dinosaur. A nuts and bolts guy who spent 30 years at Ford optimizing transmission casings. He was a good mechanical engineer, but he treated software like magic, something you bought, not something you understood. Miller wouldn't audit the kernel. He would be terrified to touch it. He would see my complex, custom-written battery management code and say, if it works, don't fix it. Just ship it. And that was the fatal error. Because the heartbeat protocol wasn't a malicious trap I set to destroy them. It was a safety leash. When you're dealing with solid-state electrolytes at that density, thermal runaway is a nightmare scenario. If the cooling controller crashes, the battery turns into a bomb in roughly 30 seconds. So, during the RAN phase, I wrote a dead man switch into the deepest layer of the boot code. Every 168 hours, 7 days exactly, the car's onboard computer pings the central server for a specific, encrypted hash key. It's "Hey, are you there? Are you monitoring me? Check." If the server replies, the timer resets. If the server doesn't reply, or if the car is offline, the computer assumes the cooling system is unmonitored. To prevent an explosion, it initiates Protocol 0. It drains the capacitor banks instantly and chemically locks the electrolyte paste. It turns the battery into a brick. A very expensive, unfixable brick. I used to manually update the hash key every Sunday night from my laptop in the garage. It was part of my routine. I intended to remove the protocol before mass production, replacing it with a permanent consumer version. But they fired me on Tuesday. They locked me out of the server. And they rushed the Founders Edition cars to the VIPs on Friday morning to pump the stock price. Those 5,000 cars were running my dev firmware. I looked at the calendar. The first deliveries happened last Friday at 9 a.m. PST. Today was Friday. It was 8:30 a.m. I turned on the TV. The NASDAQ opening ceremony. My father stood on the podium, holding the gavel. Elena was next to him, holding a bottle of champagne. The ticker symbol VGRD was emblazoned on the massive screens behind them. 10 seconds. The announcer shouted. My dad looked like a king. He was smiling, waving to the cheering traders. He had won. He had stolen my genius, discarded me like trash, and was about to become a billionaire. Clang. 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 The bell rang. Confetti rained down. The stock opened at $150. It jumped to $180 within seconds. $210. $250. The market cap hit $50 billion. My dad's stake was worth $20 billion. I sat on my futon, eating cold cereal. I checked my watch. 8:55 a.m. I opened Twitter, X. I searched for Vanguard 1. The feed was full of pictures of celebrities posing with their new cars. A famous rapper sitting on the hood. A Silicon Valley VC charging his in his driveway. Best car ever made, one tweet read. Range is insane, 8:59 a.m. I took a sip of milk. Happy IPO day, Dad, I whispered. 9 a.m. The minute hand clicked over. The 168-hour timer expired. Somewhere in Beverly Hills, a rapper's car was pinging a server that I no longer had access to, looking for a handshake that no one knew how to send. The server would return null. The car's logic gate would flip from 1 to 0. The cooling pumps would stop. The chemical lock would engage. I refreshed the Twitter feed. Nothing for a minute. Then, a new tweet appeared. At Crypto, King, my Vanguard just shut off on the freeway. Can't steer. Screens went black. WTF? I refreshed again. At Tech, Blogger, Review Unit Vanguard 1 just died in my driveway. Won't turn on. Making a weird sizzling sound. At Celeb, Gossip, did, famous actor, just break down on Sunset Boulevard? Traffic is backed up for miles. His new Vanguard looks dead. On the TV, the CNBC anchor was still interviewing my dad. Mr. Vanguard, the stock is soaring. You've revolutionized the industry. My dad was beaming. It's all about quality, Jim. We didn't rush. We built perfection. He didn't see the producer behind the camera waving frantically. He didn't see the stock ticker in the corner of the screen freeze. VGRD, $290. Then, it ticked down. VGRD, $285. I refreshed Twitter again. It was a waterfall. Hashtag Vanguard fail is trending. My brakes locked up. It's a brick. I can't even open the doors. 5,000 cars just died simultaneously? Is this a hack? I leaned back in my cheap chair. The silence of the Lambda had begun. The heartbeat had stopped. And the panic was about to start. The interview on CNBC didn't end, it disintegrated. 1 minute, my father was pontificating about American innovation. The next, the anchor, Jim Cramer, touched his earpiece, his face draining of color. Robert, Cramer interrupted, his voice losing its jovial bounce. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are getting reports from the California Highway Patrol. They are issuing a SIG alert for the 405, the 101, and the I-5. They're saying dozens of Vanguard vehicles have simply stopped in the middle of traffic. My father's smile froze. It was a rictus of confusion. That's impossible, Jim. Probably operator error. The regenerative braking takes some getting used to. It's not just California, the anchor pressed, looking at a tablet handed to him by a producer. We have reports from Miami, Austin, and New York. Social media is flooding with videos. Robert, are you aware of a systemic failure? My father looked at the camera. For the first time in my life, I saw the mask slip. The titan of industry vanished, replaced by a terrified man who had no idea how his own product worked. We will look into it, my father stammered. I need to go. He ripped the microphone off his lapel and walked off the set while the cameras were still rolling. The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen turned red. VGRD, $220.00 VGRD, $195. I muted the TV. I didn't need to hear the pundits speculating. I knew exactly what was happening inside the server room at Vanguard HQ. I opened my laptop and pulled up the schematics of the Infinity Cell cooling controller, files I had backed up on a secure drive before they wiped my company access. Here is what Paul Miller, the new CTO from Ford, was staring at right now. The firmware kernel had a daemon process called watchdog_D. Every 168 hours, it woke up and pinged a specific IP address on the internal network, 192.168.1.50/8080/auth. It expected a return packet containing SHA-256 hash key. That key was generated by a script on my laptop, the laptop they had confiscated and undoubtedly wiped. When the car didn't get the key, the logic was brutal but necessary. If auth_response equals null, then execute thermal_lock, set system_state equals bricked. Why did I write it? Because early prototypes of the Infinity Cell were volatile. If the cooling pump software crashed during a test drive, the battery would overheat and explode with the force of a small tactile missile. The watchdog was a failsafe. It ensured that if the car lost contact with the monitoring team, me, it would chemically neutralize itself before it could catch fire. It fired a catalyst into the electrolyte gel, hardening it instantly. The battery became inert. Safe. But completely useless. You couldn't patch this over the air. You couldn't reboot it. To fix a bricked Vanguard 1, you had to physically remove the battery pack, drill it out, and replace it. Cost of a new battery pack, $45,000. Number of cars bricked, 5,000. Total immediate damage, $225 million. And that didn't include the towing fees, the lawsuits, or the stock crash. My phone rang. It wasn't my dad. It was Elena. I let it ring. I took a bite of my toast. It rang again. And again. Finally, on the fourth attempt, I answered. Hello? What did you do? Elena screamed. She sounded hysterical. I could hear sirens in the background. She was probably stuck in a limousine somewhere in Manhattan. Lucas. Fix it. Fix it right now. Hello, Elena, I said calmly. Happy IPO day. I saw you on TV. You looked great. Don't give me that. She shrieked. We have 5,000 dead cars. The police are calling us. The NTSB is launching an investigation. Paul Miller says the code is locked. What did you do to the servers? I didn't touch the servers, I said. I'm sitting in my apartment, watching The Price is Right. Remember? You have a restraining order against me. If I touch a Vanguard server, I go to jail. You planted a virus. It's not a virus, I corrected her. It's a safety protocol. The heartbeat. It requires a manual handshake every week. It's designed to prevent the batteries from exploding if the monitoring team goes dark. Exploding? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Yes. Since you fired the monitoring team, me, and wiped my laptop, the cars assumed they were abandoned. So they neutralized themselves to keep the passengers safe. You should be thanking me. I just saved you from 5,000 lawsuits for wrongful death by fire. You did this on purpose, she hissed. I built a safety mechanism for a prototype, I said. You were the ones who decided to sell a prototype as a finished product without auditing the code. You rushed it, Elena. You wanted the money. Give me the code, she demanded. Give me the handshake key. I can't. Bullshit. Dad will pay you. We'll give you the stipend. We'll give you double. Elena, listen to me, I said, leaning forward in my chair. It's too late. The protocol isn't a pause button. It's a kill switch. The catalyst is already fired. The electrolyte is solid rock. The batteries are dead. There was a long silence on the other end. There. Ruined? Completely, I said. You have to replace every single one. That will bankrupt us, she whispered. The recall costs. The stock. I guess you shouldn't have fired the only guy who knew how the car worked 2 days before launch, I said. Or maybe you should have let me vest my stock options. Then I would have had a financial incentive to warn you. I'm going to destroy you, she snarled, the fear turning back into anger. I'm going to tell the FBI you sabotaged us. You'll rot in prison. Go ahead, I said. Show them the source code. Show them the date stamps. I wrote that code 3 years ago. It's documented in the RAND logs as a critical safety feature. If you didn't read the logs before you fired me, that's negligence, not sabotage. Good luck explaining to the SEC why you sold a car you didn't understand. I hung up. I looked at the TV. The stock was in free fall. VGRD, $95. Trading had been halted due to volatility. I opened my brokerage app. My put options, bets that the stock would crash, were up 4,000%. My $10,000 was now worth nearly $500,000. And the stock hadn't even hit bottom yet. But I wasn't done. Elena threatened to blame me. I knew my family. They would spin this. They would go on TV and say I was a disgruntled employee who hacked the system. They would try to make me the villain to save their own skins. I needed to get ahead of the narrative. I opened my email client. I had a folder named Insurance. It contained every email I had sent my father and Paul Miller in the last month. Subject, critical, firmware audit required before launch from Lucas Vanguard 2, Robert Vanguard, Paul Miller body, Dad, Paul, we cannot ship the Founders Edition yet. The firmware is still running the dev kernel. It requires manual weekly maintenance. If we don't patch this to a consumer version, the cars will fail. We need 3 more months. Reply from Robert Vanguard body, stop stalling, Lucas. We launch on Friday. Paul says it's fine. Just sign the IP transfer and get out of the way. I took a screenshot. I opened Twitter. I drafted a new tweet. I tried to warn them. They fired me instead. Here is the proof that Vanguard Motors knowingly shipped a prototype to the public. I attached the screenshot. My finger hovered over the post button. Once I did this, there was no going back. It was total war. I pressed post. Social media moves faster than the stock market, faster than the news cycle, and definitely faster than a corporate legal team. I pressed post at 10:15 a.m. By 10:20 a.m., the tweet had 5,000 retweets. By 10:30 a.m., it had 50,000. The screenshot of the email was damning. It wasn't just proof of incompetence, it was proof of knowledge. It showed my father, Robert Vanguard, explicitly ignoring a safety warning to chase a launch date. In the world of product liability, that is the difference between an accident and a crime. I sat back and watched the internet do what it does best, dissect the corpse. At Tech, Jesus, if this email is real, Vanguard Motors is done. They knowingly shipped a brick. Hashtag Vanguard, Gate. At Legal, Eagle, this isn't just a recall. This is securities fraud. If they hid this from the S1 filing, the SEC is going to eat them alive. My phone started buzzing so hard it vibrated off the table. Calls from CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I ignored them all. I wasn't going to talk to the press yet. I let the screenshot speak for me. Then, the trading halt on NASDAQ lifted. I switched tabs to my brokerage account. Before the halt, VGRD was at $95. When the market reopened, the algorithm digested three things. 1. 5,000 dead cars. 2. The CEO fleeing an interview. 3. The whistleblower evidence of fraud. The stock opened at $32. It had lost 90% of its value in 2 hours. $50 billion of market cap had evaporated into thin air. My put options, the bets I placed with my last $10,000, were now deep in the money. I watched the numbers in my account tick up. Account value, $8,450,000. I was rich. Not Vanguard IPO rich, but never have to fix a transmission again rich. I clicked sell all. I cashed out. I moved the money immediately to a secure treasury account. On the TV, the coverage had shifted. They were no longer talking about the glitch. They were talking about the tweet. "We are waiting for a statement from Vanguard Motors," the anchor said. But if this email from former RAND head Lucas Vanguard is authentic, it paints a picture of gross negligence. Suddenly, the screen cut to a breaking news feed. A podium had been set up outside the Vanguard HQ in Palo Alto. My father walked out. He looked wrecked. His tie was crooked. He was sweating. But he had his CEO face on. He was flanked by Paul Miller, the useless CTO, and a phalanx of lawyers. "The allegations made on social media today are false," my father lied, staring directly into the camera. "This is a coordinated cyber attack by a disgruntled former employee who was fired for incompetence. The email circulating is a forgery. Lucas Vanguard hacked our systems and planted a logic bomb to sabotage our launch. We are working with the FBI to have him arrested for corporate terrorism." He was doubling down. He was gambling that he could crush me with legal weight before the truth came out. I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. "Bad move, Dad," I whispered. I opened my laptop again. I didn't need to argue. I just needed to provide verification. When you send an email through a corporate server, it carries a DKIM, domain keys identified mail, signature. It's a cryptographic stamp that verifies the sender and ensures the message hasn't been altered. I had the raw header data of the email. I posted a second tweet. Here is the raw DKIM header of the email. Any security researcher can verify the cryptographic signature. It came from Robert Vanguard's server. It was signed by his private key. It is not a forgery. The math doesn't lie. I attached the text file. Within 10 minutes, the tech community responded. At Security Research, just ran the DKIM check on Lucas's file. It matches Vanguard's public key. The email is 100% authentic. The CEO is lying. At Cyber Sec Daily, confirmed. Robert Vanguard just lied on live TV. This is over. The internet turned on him instantly. The hashtag arrest Robert Vanguard started trending. On TV, reporters began shouting questions at my father. "Mr. Vanguard. Experts say the email is verified. Why did you deny it? Did you know about the safety protocol? Are you going to recall the cars?" My father looked like a deer in headlights. He looked at Paul Miller for help, but Miller was staring at his shoes, trying to become invisible. The lawyers grabbed my father and practically dragged him away from the podium. The feed cut back to the studio. "A disastrous scene in Palo Alto," the anchor said, shaking his head. "Robert Vanguard fleeing questions as tech experts verify the whistleblower's claims. The stock is now trading at $12. I closed my laptop. My father had tried to frame me. Instead, he had just handed the DOJ a perjury charge on a silver platter. I heard a heavy knock on my door. My heart spiked. Had he actually sent the police? Did he send his private security goons again? I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't private security. Standing in the hallway were two men and a woman in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. "Lucas Vanguard?" the woman asked. She showed me a badge. "Special Agent Ross, Financial Crimes Division. And this is Agent Miller from the Cyber Task Force." "Am I under arrest?" I asked, keeping my hand on the doorframe. "No," Agent Ross said. "But we just saw your tweets. And we saw the stock market implode. We're opening an investigation into Vanguard Motors for securities fraud and wire fraud." She looked past me into my messy apartment, filled with electronics and half-eaten food. "We need to secure your laptop as evidence," she said. "And we need you to come with us. You're not a suspect, Lucas. You're the star witness." I looked at my computer. Then I looked at the agents. "Can I bring my hard drive?" I asked. "I have more emails." Agent Ross smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, but it was a satisfied one. "Bring everything," she said. "We have a feeling this is going to be a long night." I grabbed my backpack. I grabbed the hard drive containing the heartbeat protocol source code and the entire email history of my warnings. As I walked out of my apartment, flanked by federal agents, I checked my phone one last time. My sister, Elena, had sent me a text. Elena, Dad is having chest pains. The ambulance is coming. Are you happy now? I looked at the text. I thought about the security guards dragging me out in the rain. I thought about them stealing my patent. I thought about the 5,000 people they endangered to make a buck. I typed a reply. Lucas, tell him not to worry. The ambulance runs on diesel. It won't brick on the way to the hospital. I turned off my phone. Ready, I told the agents. The interview room at the San Francisco FBI field office wasn't like the ones in the movies. There was no two-way mirror, no smoky haze. Just a sterile room with flickering fluorescent lights and a table that smelled of lemon pledge. Agent Ross sat across from me. A court stenographer was typing in the corner. A video camera hummed on a tripod. For the record, Ross said, adjusting her glasses. Mr. Vanguard, are you stating that you did not remotely access the Vanguard Motors servers on the morning of October 14th? I am, I said. I didn't access them because I couldn't. My credentials were revoked on October 12th. You can check the server logs. My user account, L_Vanguard_admin, was disabled by Paul Miller at 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday. And the shutdown? She asked. The event that disabled 5,000 vehicles? It wasn't a shutdown, I corrected her, leaning forward. It was a default safety state. Think of it like a train conductor's dead man's pedal. If the conductor stops pressing the pedal, because he had a heart attack, or in this case, because he was fired, the train puts on the brakes to prevent a crash. The car didn't receive the all-clear signal from the server. It assumed the thermal management system was compromised. It acted to save lives. Agent Miller, the cyber specialist, looked up from his laptop. We've verified the code on the hard drive he provided. It matches his description. The function is labeled safety_thermal_lock. It's dated 3 years ago. It's not a virus. Agent Ross nodded slowly. Okay. So it's a safety feature. But here is the multi-million-dollar question, Lucas, can you reverse it? I looked at the agents. This was the moment where the knife twisted. No, I said. Why not? Ross asked. If we get a court order to force you to enter the code? If we grant you immunity? You don't understand the chemistry, I explained. The infinity cell uses a semi-solid electrolyte. When the thermal_lock engages, it doesn't just turn off the computer. It fires a chemical catalyst into the battery cells. It turns the gel into an inert solid, basically concrete. The room went silent. The stenographer stopped typing for a split second. Concrete? Ross repeated. Yes. It prevents thermal runaway. It makes sure the car can't catch fire, no matter what. But it also means the electrons can no longer flow. The battery is physically destroyed. You can't patch it with software. You can't fix it with a code. You have to drill the battery out of the chassis and install a new one. Agent Ross did the math in her head. Her eyes widened. 5,000 cars, she whispered. At what cost per unit? $45,000 for the pack, I said. Plus labor. Plus shipping, you're looking at $250 million in hardware damage. And that's just the cars on the road. The inventory in the warehouse? If those were running the dev firmware too. They're all bricks. Jesus, Agent Miller muttered. My father knew, I said quietly. I told him. I emailed him. I begged him not to ship the dev units. He rolled the dice. He lost. Agent Ross stood up. She picked up her phone. Get the warrant, she said into the receiver. Raid the headquarters. Secure the physical inventory. And find Robert Vanguard. I don't care if he's in a hospital bed, put an agent at his door. He is a flight risk. She looked back at me. You're free to go, Mr. Vanguard. But don't leave town. We're going to need you to explain this to a grand jury. I walked out of the federal building into the cool night air. I felt light. The weight of the secret, the pressure of the launch, the anger of the betrayal, it was all gone. I had told the truth, and the truth had set off a bomb. I pulled out my phone. It had been off for hours. When I turned it on, it flooded with notifications. The news was moving fast. Breaking, FBI raids Vanguard Motors HQ. Images, agents seizing servers and files. Update, Robert Vanguard placed under house arrest at Stanford Hospital. The stock was now trading in the single digits in the after-hours market. It was a penny stock. The company was effectively dead. I hailed a cab. Take me to the Embarcadero, I said. I wanted to see the water. I wanted to sit and watch the Bay Bridge lights. As I sat on a bench, watching the dark water, my phone rang. It wasn't my family. It was a number I didn't recognize. This is Lucas, I answered. Mr. Vanguard, a crisp, professional voice said. This is Arthur Sterling. I am the chairman of the board for Vanguard Motors. I paused. The board. The money men. The people who had backed my father. Hello, Arthur. We are in an emergency session, Sterling said. He sounded tired. We just received a briefing from the FBI regarding the chemical nature of the failure. They say the inventory is destroyed. That is correct. We are preparing to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the morning, Sterling said. However, there is the matter of the intellectual property. The patents. The designs for the Infinity Cell. What about them? The banks are going to liquidate us, Sterling said. Omnicorp, Ford, Tesla. They're all going to be bidding on the scraps. But the IP is useless without the engineer who understands it. The heartbeat code proves that. We have a Ferrari engine, but no one knows how to start it but you. I waited. I knew what was coming. We want to offer you a deal, Lucas, Sterling said. We want to spin off the RAND division into a new entity. We want you to come back as CEO. We will fire your father. We will fire Elena. We will fire Paul Miller. We will wipe the slate clean. You take the IP, you fix the consumer version, and we try to save the technology. You want me to save your investment, I translated. We want to save the car, Sterling corrected. It's a good car, Lucas. You know it is. It deserves to exist. Don't let your father's greed kill your creation. I looked at the Bay Bridge. I thought about the car. He was right. The Infinity Cell was revolutionary. It was the future. My father had tainted it, but the tech was innocent. I have conditions, I said. Name them. 1. Robert and Elena Vanguard are stripped of all equity. Their shares are cancelled. They leave with zero. Done, Sterling said instantly. The fraud investigation gives us the bad actor clause in the bylaws. We can strip them naked. 2. I want absolute control. No board oversight on engineering decisions for 5 years. If I say we delay a launch for safety, we delay. Agreed. And 3, I said, looking at the water. The name changes. No more Vanguard motors. What do you want to call it? I thought about the heat. I thought about the battery that wouldn't burn, the code that wouldn't yield, and the phoenix rising from the ashes of my father's arrogance. Call it Flux, I said. Flux Automotive. I'll have the lawyers draw up the papers, Sterling said. Welcome back, CEO. I hung up. I stood up and took a deep breath of sea air. My father was going to prison. My sister was going to be a pariah. The company they stole was gone. But tomorrow, I was going to walk back into that building. I was going to drill out 5,000 batteries. And I was going to build something that lasted. I checked my brokerage account one last time. $8.5 million. I transferred $1 million to a legal defense fund for the customers who bought the Founders Edition. It was the right thing to do. Then I called an Uber. Where to? The app asked. I typed in the address of the old machine shop where it all started. It was time to get back to work. The morning after the FBI raid, I didn't go to the sleek glass headquarters in Palo Alto. I went to the distribution warehouse in Fremont. It was a massive hangar, the size of 4 football fields. And it was silent. Inside, lined up in perfect rows under the buzzing halogen lights, were 3,000 Vanguard 1 vehicles. These were the inventory cars, the ones destined for the second wave of shipments to Europe and Asia. They were beautiful machines. Sleek curves, carbon fiber panels, midnight blue paint. And every single one of them was dead. I walked down the center aisle. My footsteps echoed. It felt less like a car factory and more like a morgue. Mr. Vanguard? I turned. The warehouse manager, a guy named Rick who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, was walking toward me. He was holding a clipboard. Mr. Sterling called, Rick said nervously. He said you're in charge now? I am, I said, running my hand along the fender of a bricked car. What's the status, Rick? They're paperweights, Lucas, Rick sighed, dropping his professional facade. We tried to jump the 12 volts rails. We tried the diagnostic ports. Nothing. The main packs are solid rock. We can't even roll them onto the trucks because the parking brakes are electronically locked engaged. I nodded. The heartbeat protocol was thorough. We have to drill them out, I said. Rick stared at me. Drill them? These are structural battery packs. They're glued to the chassis. It'll take 10 hours of labor per car. That's 30,000 man-hours just for this room. Then hire more men, I said. Call the local unions. Call the trade schools. I want this floor swarming with mechanics by tomorrow morning. We aren't scrapping these cars, Rick. We're rebuilding them. And the battery packs? I've already ordered the new cells, I said. And I'm rewriting the firmware tonight. No more dead man switch. Just a car that works. The next few months were a blur of grueling labor. We didn't just fix the cars, we had to fix the trust. I held a press conference, not in a suit, but in my shop clothes, standing next to a disassembled battery pack. I explained exactly what happened. I didn't spin it. I didn't blame hackers. I told them it was a safety failure caused by rushing a prototype. The public, surprisingly, respected the honesty. The stock, now trading under the new ticker Flux, stabilized at $15. It wasn't the insane $300 of the IPO, but it was real. But while I was rebuilding, my family was disintegrating. I was subpoenaed to testify at the preliminary hearing for United States v. Robert Vanguard. I sat in the witness stand. My father was at the defense table. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. The judge had denied bail, citing the massive amount of money missing from the company accounts, money he had stashed in the Cayman Islands, which the FBI was currently clawing back. He looked old. The dye in his hair had grown out, revealing patches of gray. He refused to look at me. Elena was there, too. She had taken a plea deal early. In exchange for testifying against Dad, she got probation and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer of a public company. She sat in the back row, wearing dark glasses, trying to be invisible. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Holloway, walked up to the stand. "Mr. Vanguard," she asked, "did you explicitly warn your father that the cars were not ready for shipment?" "I did," I said. "And what was his response?" "He told me to stop stalling," I said, looking at my father. "He said the stock price was more important than the engineering." My father flinched. "And regarding the heartbeat protocol," she continued, "did your father know it existed?" "He signed the RAND briefs," I said. Page 42 of the quarterly report from last year. Safety protocols for prototype thermal management. He initialed it. The prosecutor projected the document onto the screen. There, in bold blue ink, were the initials R.V. "No further questions," she said. My father's lawyer didn't even cross-examine me. There was no point. The paper trail was a fortress. As I stepped down from the stand, I had to walk past the defense table. My father looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I did it for us," he whispered hoarsely. "I wanted to build a legacy for the family." I stopped. The courtroom went quiet. "You built a legacy, Dad," I said quietly. "A legacy of fraud. You didn't do it for us. You did it for the applause." I walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood on the roof of the factory. The sun was setting over Fremont, casting a golden light over the parking lot. The lot was full. But not with bricked cars. It was full of Flux Ones. They were ready for delivery. The new battery packs were installed. The new firmware was verified. The Founders Edition customers, the ones who had been stranded on the highway, were getting the first upgraded units, free of charge, with a personal apology letter signed by me. My phone buzzed. It was Elena. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "I saw the news," she said. Her voice was quiet, lacking the arrogant snap it used to have. "The reviews are good. Car and driver gave it 5 stars. "Yeah," I said. "It's a good car." I'm working at a Starbucks," she said. A nervous laugh. "In Arizona. Nobody knows who I am here. It's peaceful." "That's good, Elena." "Lucas," she paused. "Dad was sentenced today. Did you hear?" "I've been busy," I lied. "How long?" 12 years, she said. "He'll be 70 when he gets out." I looked out at the rows of cars. 12 years. The same amount of time I had spent begging him to take my engineering seriously. "I have to go, Elena," I said. "We're shipping the first truckload." "Lucas?" "Yeah?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything." "Take care of yourself," I said, and hung up. I walked to the edge of the roof. Down below, the first car transporter was loading up. The electric motors hummed, a sound of pure, efficient power. My father was in a cell. My sister was pouring coffee. And I was exactly where I belonged. I wiped a smudge of grease off my hand onto my jeans. The heartbeat had stopped. But the pulse? The pulse was stronger than ever.